Hey folks, this is Ardwulf. Welcome. We are going to do an unboxing today. Now, I know some folks have sort of a visceral distaste for unboxing videos, and I've done my share of unboxing videos, and that's the kind of thing I'm inclined to do less of in the future. However, I have something special here today, and I've done this kind of thing before, in that I have a very old product that is in the shrink wrap that I am going to bust open and show you. The trick here, the punchline, if you will, is that this is not a war game. This is the Harn Regional Module from Columbia Games. Now let's take a look here at the back. It is in the shrink wrap. I picked this up from a long defunct game store, and of course I have the product. I have a couple copies of this, so I have an open copy as well. This is one of my favorite fantasy RPG settings. It's one of my favorite settings, period. This particular item, I'm looking for a copyright date. I want to say this was originally published in 1983, so bear that in mind when you look at the component quality inside, that it's really, really high for 1983, and actually I think holds up really well today. So Harn is an island set on a world called Cathera, which this particular set doesn't talk much about, but you can see here that you have a regional map. This island here in red is the island of Harn, and that is where the setting is centered. So this has been, this thing's been gathering dust forever. It's just been sitting on my shelf. As you can see, the box, I don't know how well you're making this out on the camera, but the box is pretty dished. But like I said, I have another copy of this. Actually, I've got a couple copies of it in different versions. The current version is a loose leaf binder, actually, which I hope to be able to show you soon. So and even the shrink wrap, there's a hole here, and some dust bunnies have begun to inhabit it. I am never going to get rid of this, so I feel like it is okay if I bust open the shrink wrap. So let's do that. And I am imagining that the shrink wrap will be quite brittle. Now, my original set from years and years and years ago, at this point, by that I mean the early 90s, the box is long gone. I have no idea what even happened to it. I'm trying not to, I'm going to cut this so I don't wreck the box opening this. But I still have all the materials, and I have, over the years, accumulated several copies of one particular component that we're going to take a look at in here. Let's open it up. That would be the first item, the map. Now, I normally don't break out the map and show it to you, but I'm going to do it in this video because the map is something special. So let's rotate this. Now, there's two books in here, and I don't know what else, to be honest. And this is actually, looks like a different printing than my existing copy, which has a yellow Harn View book. So there's two books. Let me get the box out of the way. There's two books. There's Harn View, which is, I imagine, a 32-page book or so. Yeah, it's a 32-page book, and it's on this kind of really nice cream paper. Print's a little small if you have a problem with that. This is the basic introduction to the setting, and in this context, the setting is the island of Harn itself, which I'll show you in a little bit. This is a complete overview at a quite high level, and the island's fairly big. It's bigger than the island of Britain. So you have a preface here where Robin Crosby, the original author of this product, who contributed to it heavily over the years, along with Tom Douglas and a bunch of other people. Some of those credits are in here. Some inspirations are in here. I'm not obviously going to read the whole book. But you have here a somewhat larger version of the map that was on the back of the box. This is the context in which Harn exists. Here's the island of Harn. Here is the Lithian mainland. Actually, these are the Lithian mainland, and this is the large isle of Ivey, which is home to the Ivinians, which I am not going to talk about in this video. There's an introduction. There's a brief one-page overview of the cultures and the various kingdoms. I apologize for the shadows. I'll try and only use my left hand with this stuff. And there is a map on the island of the different principalities or states or nations, or they're basically all kingdoms except for the Thardic Republic, which is the remains of an empire, which superficially will remind you of the Roman Empire and Roman Republic, but it is easy to get lost in that particular comparison. This is not a new product line for me. I mean, I've been playing in this setting for a long time. I don't have a current game going, but you can see there's a lot of terra incognita here. A lot of these wilderlands, the dark shaded areas are the inhabited kingdoms, the so-called civilized realms. The rest of the island is filled with barbarians and orcs and all kinds of things to spawn adventures. So we have a very brief outline of the cultures. We have a fairly brief outline of the religions, including 10 deities, and I really like this pantheon of deities too. Here is another map that this is a trade goods map that shows you where the resources are on Harn, and you have a short article on economics. The writing here is quite dense, not only because the print is small, but because there's a lot of information packed in here, and there are literally plot hooks in every paragraph, adventure hooks in every paragraph. This is the history section. This is one of the biggest sections of this book, and it's fairly lengthy. And you know, usually this kind of, and there's a timeline at the end. Usually this kind of thing is kind of boring. Not in this case. I found this history fascinating to read. It's well developed. It all hangs together. Harn is a setting that a lot of people have described, not inaccurately, as low magic. That is correct, but it is superficial. The reality is that it is written in such a way that it is low magic. It is very Dark Ages and very gritty, but at the same time there are dials, all of the campaign elements that you would want, like dungeons and weird monsters and powerful gods that give powers to their clerics and orders of magicians. These are all in this setting, and you could choose to either focus on those things or focus on not those things and run a pretty mundane campaign. I think in the blog post that's going to accompany this video, I'm going to talk about this a little more, but I think somebody that really likes the setting of a Game of Thrones would really like this setting. I think it's got a lot of kindred spirit, and of course predates Game of Thrones, the first novel, by some years. So without going into the history, maybe I'll do something on that in the future. But I really like the history, and like I said, it's loaded with plot hooks. This is a little section that talks about the regional map, about what the different terrain types actually mean. In the back, you have a sort of character creation section where you can randomly roll species if you want. I don't know anybody that actually wants to do that. You can roll for birthplace. And you can roll for some family relation type stuff. Now, an important point here is that this is all complete, and always has been, completely system agnostic. There is no system in these books. There is a system for Harn called Harn Master, which maybe I'll do something on at some point. I've got a bunch of that stuff too, and I've actually run it very successfully, I might add, in the past. That was a great campaign. Another thing that's fairly novel and is easily adaptable to any game is what they call the pre-game. And basically this is kind of like a light role-playing adjunct to character creation, where you talk about where'd your character get started, what kinds of decisions did you make, and kind of go through your entire character's history in a sort of narrative way in 10 minutes. It's actually really cool, and I've adapted this particular idea to other game systems and had it run really well. In Harn Master, it worked amazingly well, because the system's kind of built around that. And you've got, there's a blank hex sheet. It's a blank hex sheet. And you've got a system for timekeeping, which is probably one of the best systems of its kind that I have seen. There's a page of explicit adventure hooks. These are really campaign hooks. You could easily hang an entire campaign on any one of these 9 things. And there are encounter tables in the back. And a weather system. This is actually probably the best fantasy weather generation system I've ever seen or used. And it works really well. And there's a tool that you can download somewhere online. And if I can find that again, I will put a link to it. If you Google Harn weather, I think you will find it. It will automate all this for you for as many days as you want. So you can have I think for my last campaign, I automatically generated the entire year's worth of weather in advance and printed it out. And here's a system for movement rates. That becomes important. So I'm going to step aside here, and I'm going to bust out the map, and then, and only then, am I going to show you the second book, Harn X. Okay, so here is the map unfolded that you get in the box, and I have about 5 of these things accumulated in various products over the years. You can get a free copy of this, by the way, from Columbia Games' website. This is, in my opinion, still the best looking and most useful fantasy RPG map I have ever seen. It is packed with information, and I'm unclear as to how well you're going to be able to differentiate the colors, and I'll zoom in on this in a second. but it's a very detailed map. These hexes are subdivided into or grouped into these sort of 5 hex grid boxes, which are used to identify locations in the book. And you can see you have the major kingdoms. Here is the region of Tharda. This is the river basin that the Thard River drains from. And there's 3 civilized kingdoms there: Candé, Rithim, and the not kingdom, Thardic Republic. Over here you have the kingdom of Meldurin, the so-called Wizard's Kingdom. Over here is the kingdom of Kaldor, which is where a lot of people choose to start their Harn campaigns. It is a really good place to start a campaign. There's a lot going on there. It's really rich with adventure opportunities. There's a tiny kingdom called Kybissa right here. There is a dwarven kingdom in Harn called Azadmir. It is up here, and there is an elven kingdom called Ivale, but it's located in the Shava forest. And these are kind of remnants. And I don't want to spoil anything here, but when I say there are dials that you can dial up the fantasy elements in Harn, I mean they really are there. The elves and dwarves of Harn are actually the elves and dwarves of Middle-earth. It's not said that way, but it is kind of narrated that way in their histories. If you read them very closely, they are pretty much the elves of Tolkien and the dwarves of Tolkien. There are no halflings developed or presented anywhere, but there are rumors of halflings. There's also a non-human society called the Mere Dragons, the Ilme, and they live up here. They are like big hulking sort of dragon-like humanoids. They're also the Gargoon, who are the orcs of Harn, and they're exceptionally well developed as well. So without, I want to show you why this map is so useful. So let me zoom in. I put the map under plexiglass, even though there might be a little bit of glare. I'm trying to avoid that. I put this thing under plexiglass so it would lay flat because it has literally been sitting in this box since 1983, so 35 years. This is Tharda, so we're zooming in on Tharda a little bit, and we have a number of different terrain types. Interestingly, terrain, not elevation, but terrain ruggedness is represented by symbols, which are going to be really hard to see. They're not hard to see if you have the map in front of you. They're hard to see, going to be hard to see on video, and then you see this little texture here. Those represent hills, and this sort of different texture represents a mountainous area, whereas vegetation is indicated by color. So here you have this kind of mixed woodland. Here you have more of an alpine woodland. There are some actual alpine terrain in the on the island. Then here you have like a heath, like a barren moor type of territory, and we saw some swamp earlier. This sort of canary yellow, I would say, represents cultivated land, and then the lighter green represents sort of light woodland or scrubland. There's a lot of development that's gone into this setting over the course of, like I said, about 35 years. I think I got that math right. It's been a long day. It is exceptionally well thought out. It is exceptionally detailed. Now, when we talk about this set, I'm focusing just on this initial set, and then the current version gives you basically the same information. It does include this exact same map too, although I think it's a newer version of it because it says Harn in huge letters on it in what would be white space on this old version. I actually have one that I have cut up to that I have used to make photocopies and scans and stuff like that, so I can insert them in my adventures. Everything has been well thought out here. There is a place for whatever fantasy element you want to put in a campaign, whether that's a low magic campaign or a high magic campaign. You want an Order of Wizards? There's an Order of Wizards. There's one right here in Eliath. There is a chantry of the Order of Arcane Lore there. They are there. They're just secretive. And most people might not encounter them. Most people might not encounter orcs, but they're in there. If you want to focus on those things, you can focus on those things. So let me wrap the video up by switching gears and going to the second book, because that ties into the map. Okay, so book 2 is the Harn X, and it is what it sounds like. It is a giant alphabetical index. Starting on page, a super brief introduction, starting on page 2 here. And I think this is a 64-page book, if I'm not mistaken. And it's all on this, all the old stuff's on this kind of cream paper. The newer stuff I'll talk about later, but it is available in both print and PDF You can get it from DriveThruRPG or directly from Columbia. If you buy the printed versions from Columbia, you get these fancy binders. Well, they're not really fancy binders. They're regular binders, but they have fancy inserts in them with whatever you bought. So what the index is, and again, this is going to sound fairly boring. What the index is a literal glossary of the stuff in the setting. Every location on this map, every named location, every mountain peak, every weird point of interest, every small settlement has an entry in this index. Every order of clerics that's mentioned in Harn View has an entry in this index. And the orders are kind of what make the religions, in my opinion, with this setting. The orders are really cool. All the historical figures that are in the history all have an entry here. And I think at the back there might be like a chronology of kings or something like that. No, I guess not. All of the different guilds that are present on Harn have an entry. And it's not richly illustrated, but hey, this is 1983. Now, I don't know for sure that the current Harn binder set has all this information in it. I'm pretty sure it's definitely more than 16 pages, which you get in here. And I'm pretty sure there is some additional information, but I'm not sure it's quite as exhaustive as the old Harn X book was. And again, this is the kind of thing you look like, oh my god, this is a huge info dump, I'm going to be so bored reading this. But it's not. It's actually really cool and interesting. This is a great setting for a fantasy RPG. And to be honest, it kind of changed the way I look at fantasy settings. I judge other fantasy settings in terms of depth by how they compare to Harn. And it's so useful is the really cool thing. The map, for example, you have a table of travel times, so you know exactly how long it's going to take your party to cross this hex. There's built-in encounter tables, so you can roll for encounters, and whether you're traveling on a civilized road or whether you're traveling in untamed wilderness haunted by barbarians and ghosts or whatnot. There's a lot of open space on this map. It's pretty ideal for hex crawls. I don't have one in this set because they introduced them later, but there are what are called poetic maps, which maybe I'll show you in a future video, which are kind of maps presented as actual in-game artifacts. They're artsy maps that you can actually print out on parchment-type paper and hand to your players as their map of Harn. And I always felt that was really cool, too. There is the time management system is actually really good, and I don't understand why more RPG systems don't incorporate something like this, where you have watches. You have 6 watches per day. In the winter, there's 2 day watches and 4 night watches, and in the summer, it's the opposite. Each watch you will roll for an encounter, and it's all in here. So I feel like I've ranted enough here. I may well. This is a more recent. This one is a 2012 printing of the same map. Colors look pretty much the same. This actually looks a little more faded. Anyway, I have gone on long enough here today, so this is something that's been kind of near and dear to me for a long time. And I've kind of been meaning to do some RPG videos, and I'm starting with this. So I'm working on maybe a second Harn video. There's going to be some blog posts, so check out the blog. If you enjoyed looking at this stuff, then by all means subscribe to the channel because there's more of this on the way. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.